This is Around the Farm, and I'm your host, Clint Schaffer, and that's Schaffer like the back end of a combine, and we're going to be talking about all things ag. Today we'll learn how your retailer can help you throughout the growing season by using the right products in the right place at the right time, from spraying, scouting, to applying fertilizer. My guest today is Kayla Bennett from FieldView FS in Princeton, Illinois. Kayla, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Clint, for having me. Appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, how about you introduce yourself to the listeners here?
Yeah, so I grew up on a small farm in Princeton, Illinois, about 400 people. We currently are a corn and soybean operation with 3 generations working on the farm. Along with helping on the family farm, I also raise some livestock. And that is the reason my grandpa and my father are the reasons why I am in agriculture today and truly have inspired me to pursue a career in agriculture, as I've watched them work while growing up and being able to help them when I do have time from my busy lifestyle. So aside the time that I work at Bennett Farms, I'm also a climate, sales, and seed support specialist with FieldView FS in Princeton, Illinois.
Now, you talked about raising livestock. What kind of livestock do you raise? And it sounds like you raise quite a few.
Yeah, so I have about 47 sheep.
Wow. That will keep somebody busy there.
Yes, definitely. Definitely no time for anything else.
Do you show them at all, or?
Nope, no showing. Basically just raise them. I raise Katahdin hair sheep for meat breed.
Oh, nice. Sell them locally then?
Yes, I do. And I also take them out to different sale barns too.
Oh, nice. Nice. Well, hey, let's jump into, just kind of looking at this year with the planting season the way that it is, and just some of the challenges that you've, just heard from your farmers, especially, maybe as they're hopefully wrapping up planting at this point in time. What have you been hearing around the countryside?
So it's definitely been a very difficult year trying to get things done in such a short amount of time. It seems like once we get in the groove of things, it just starts raining again, and then we're out for a few days. We haven't really been able to get too much checked off the list. Plans are always changing every day for us. You never know. And it seems like it's a reoccurring thing, and it doesn't look like it's going to get much better or any different.
Yeah, and we've been fighting a lot of those same struggles on our operation as well. Have you seen, some of your farmers switching crops at this point in time for how late it is?
Crops, I have not seen any switching crops right now, but they are switching hybrid maturities. So they're taking that higher maturity, that later season corn, and changing it out for earlier season corn, probably up to about 100-day to 108-day.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would imagine, along with the difficulties that the farmers are experiencing, I would imagine it's got to be fairly difficult for a retailer like FieldView.
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot of changing and trying to do different crop protections. It's a whole bucket full of just different things.
Well, I know we were talking before the podcast, what we've been struggling with on our operation of trying to figure out how we're going to change our fertilizer, right? Of not being able to get it on at the time of planting, and here we are with still not a lot of fertilizer on the crop that's out there.
Right. Yep.
Have you had to switch some of those things, whether it's a chemical plan or a fertilizer plan, around for some of these farmers?
Yes, we have had to switch some of the chemical and fertilizer plans. Some farmers aren't putting down any fertilizer. We're just the time of the year and trying to get out in those fields and basically just get the crop in the ground. And when it comes to the crop protection side of things, you're running into date deadlines for spraying. You're running into basically quite a few things once it comes down to it. And with the way that the weeds are and how tall they are right now, it's pretty difficult.
Well, I know the other thing is trying to not plant equipment at this point in time as well. I've been tracking that on Twitter, and it seems like there's quite a few that have been buried at this point in time.
Yes. So on most of our parts, we have had a couple issues where most of the field is dry, and you drive out there and you think that it's okay, and basically you just find a sinkhole. And the first thing an operator does is when they see that wet hole, they slow down. That's their first instinct. When really you should just maintain your speed, keep going through that wet hole. And then with the way the year's going, we have to take advantage of every dry day that we get. our cross specialists are working hard, driving out in those fields to check those wet holes to make sure that we don't end up with a sprayer stuck or something happening like that.
Yeah, and you talk about those dry days, and I'm surprised you're not throwing something at me right now for dragging you down to St. Louis on one of the few dry days that we've had here in June so far.
Right. My phone's been pretty busy on the way down here today. So.
Well, I would imagine. Well, we greatly appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, not a problem. Appreciate it.
Well, hey, let's kind of look over at the technology side and really, kind of your focus. I know that you focus a lot on digital farming and on the seed side. From your perspective, how have you seen farmers react to the use of digital tools? Let's say when you first started a few years ago to today.
Yeah, so it's completely different from the first time I started to now. I've been working in this position for about 2 years now. When I first started out, I had a lot of no's, no, why do I need this? I'm already using a different program or database. What do I need this for, etc., things like that. To now, where I've turned all those no's into value for the farmer by showing them what the technology can actually do on your farm and what it's capable of showing you too.
Well, I know you've done a fantastic job of that because I know you've been at the top of the leaderboard of FieldView sales. So I know you've had a lot of success out in the field there.
Yeah. Yep.
From really when you start looking at some of the most progressive farmers to some of the least progressive farmers that you work with, what do you see is really the biggest difference, between two farmers that are kind of on the opposite ends of the spectrum for technology?
So I have the biggest difference between the two is where I have guys tracking every pass, every application that they do throughout their field, their tillage equipment, anything that they can possibly keep track of for down the road when it comes to different recommendations and what they're doing in the fields. To a guy where all he wants to do is just map his first fields that he's ever mapped on his farm with an equipment as old as a 1486 Case tractor.
When you talk to some of those farmers with some of the older pieces of equipment like that, some of those older tractors, what's their first reaction when you come to them and say, hey, we can put some technology on there that allows you to map these fields?
Yeah, so some guys kind of look away from it and say, it's not going to work on this equipment. This equipment's too old. But as soon as I show them what it can kind of do and then go into what it would take to be able to do this, all of a sudden it's like there's a light that pops in their head and they think it's the coolest database ever to be able to run that on that older equipment.
That is really neat. I remember, I think one of our CBMs ended up taking a picture of our drive map anything on like a horse and plow using a motorcycle battery.
Yep.
So there's been some funny pictures taken like that.
Yep.
Well, what do you see, within the digital farming industry today from your perspective? What do you see are some of the largest gaps that we still have that we need to work at closing?
Yeah, so I believe that there's still some compatibility differences between different companies and being compatible with all the equipment that is out there. For those farmers who have been farming for 30 plus years that with running the old equipment that don't have the capability of running any maps or running any yield maps, I think it's a good idea to make sure that, you're trying to get compatible with all the equipment that is out there, kind of just like the Map Anything kit that we have now available.
I know we have an internal team at FieldView that works pretty tirelessly trying to expand that compatibility list.
Definitely. And they've done a great job doing that too, which I love that.
That is fantastic to hear. So I know that they will appreciate hearing that. So, when you're thinking about compatibility, how have farmers reacted? When they need to put different cables in, or they have to put different pieces of equipment. Are they usually pretty open to putting that into the cab?
So most of mine, yes, they are actually pretty open. I've run into a few where they don't want the extra harnessing or running the iPad because they're already running different monitors. So basically, they'll just tell me they'll keep running the monitor in there, the same monitor, and then I just pull the information off of there.
Gotcha. How about, are you starting to see a trend of farmers asking for data collected from, let's say, your sprayers that are out there running in the field?
So I have a few iPads that are out there running in sprayers now, just to beta test them, to see what data we are collecting, how it's going to be sent to the farmer. And basically, there's a few customers that I am working with that I'm waiting to see kind of their feedback on stuff and see how they like it and what they actually want to use that information for.
Yeah, that makes sense. We talked about, what are some of the gaps. What do you see are some of the biggest opportunities for digital ag? Maybe solutions that haven't been created yet, or things that you're starting to see farmers starting to ask about.
Yeah, so one of the things I have been doing this year is getting a lot more advanced seed scripts out there and getting farmers running different population rates, trying it out, and basically just to get some feedback. And I know one thing that I've had quite a few that really want is to be able to put more than just one hybrid in with the planting prescriptions, in which I'm sure that there's quite a few out there that do think about that. But that's a lot. I mean, I get it all across the board. I have great customers that give me a lot of feedback. They really come to me and say, hey, I want this to be changed, or you think you could get this to be changed? And I take it right back to my CBM and hope that he passes it along to the customer success team or back to the climate office.
Nice. How's your experience been working with climate support?
Really good, actually. There's one person there who actually supports me, answers his phone all the time, and is a great, I mean, anytime I can call him at 8 o'clock at night and he'll still answer his phone, even when I'm out in the field with the customer.
Well, that's good to hear. When you have those enhancement requests, you kind of talked about that, passing it through. Have you seen any of those requests actually come to fruition within the software?
I have saw a few when they brought out for sprayer types. I do have a few guys that do run the iPad in their sprayer, in their tractor sprayer, that wanted to track wind speed when we were able to spray, those dicamba products, and keeping track of wind speed and all that you can put in there. So that's a really good overview. And another thing is being able to view in the cab app all of your fields and basically viewing the yield analysis portion in the cab app.
Nice. So it sounds like some of those enhanced and some of those requests have started to trickle into the software.
Yes, definitely.
That's great to hear. Last episode, we ended up speaking to a drone expert and just kind of talked about how that technology is starting to get even more immersed in the digital ag space. Have your farmers started, flying drones or starting to request drone flights?
So in our area, it's not really as widespread. We do have some drones, but not necessarily that is used for imagery purposes. Mainly, we use our drones, a few times a year to check on fields, an area in a field, with a grower, or just, the crop specialist is out there by ourselves. And basically we're just checking, for looking at wind damage after a storm to kind of get a hold on what all the damage was, or something, along those lines of using those drones for. And we're starting to use them more each year to kind of get into the grower face and going out there with the grower and basically just flying their field and talking about what we see out there, what damage, if there is any, maybe some areas that we need to go check and walk out there. When that corn gets above head height, you can't really see to get a grip on too much damage that is out there, if there is any, and things like that.
That's a great segue into some of the next category, because I was wanting to talk to you about scouting, and you talk about going into head height corn, and I don't think anybody really likes to walk into corn that's over your head, especially when it's like 95 degrees. So.
Yeah, definitely.
So, we were discussing, Kayla, before the show, how extensive AgView's scouting plan is, and all the different types of solutions that you use. Could you kind of take us through what your scouting kind of looks like throughout the entire growing season? Yeah,
so I was actually a scout for AgViewFS back way long time ago. So I've scouted for a couple years before, over the summer. And basically a typical week for a scout looks like, you start off with Monday morning training. You go over what you might be seeing out there for this upcoming week, what weeds are new, what bugs you might be seeing out there. And then in each field, They basically do population counts, weed identification, and disease diagnosis. So they're out there looking for, for anything that's unusual or out of the ordinary in those fields. We use a couple different scouting apps we keep track of that generate reports for those farmers, and those reports get sent to the farmers and the crop specialists. So any issues that are in the field that we get back from those reports, we can communicate with those crop specialists, and the crop specialists can communicate with the growers to find the best solution that they need to take action with those issues or problems in the field.
So really, I mean, you're using that report to kind of create a recommendation on whether to spray an insecticide or a fungicide or something of that nature.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. Yep. So if something's going on in that field, we're getting to the crop specialist right away to let them know kind of what's going on.
And what do you see, when you're sharing back with the farmers? You talked about sharing the report. Is there any request of, hey, I want this, in my FieldView app, or tied to a pin or anything of that nature? Are you starting to see any of that request?
There are a few, not as much right now because of what they're getting when it comes to our scouting packages, and those reports are included in there too. I personally go out and walk some of the farmers' fields just to use our scouting pins and just take note on kind of what's going on out there. So then it shoots straight to their Climate FieldView account, and they're able to pull it up right then and there and see.
Yeah, we've had a lot of feedback on that kind of proof you were out there, right?
Yeah.
Of being able to see that on their phone or on their iPad.
Yep, you know exactly where you're at, what time, the date, and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. When we start thinking about this weekly plan of the scouts, from a field perspective, how many times a year are you going out and scouting, one particular field?
So usually it depends on our scouting packages. We offer two. So one of our scouting packages is once a week. So you go out there to that field once a week, you generate a report, and then you come back again the next week. Or we have our other scouting program where you're out there basically every 2 weeks scouting that field. So it just depends on once you get to black layer, usually, or once the milking stage is done, we're done scouting that field basically. So it really just depends on once we get started. In a year like this year, once the corn gets in the ground and, Mother Nature lets us back in the fields, it kind of just depends how many times we're able to get to that field.
So that sounds like that's a pretty extensive scouting package then, especially on a weekly basis.
Yes. Yep. Our scouts usually do about 3,000 to 4,000 acres each week. They're checking each field for all those insect issues, weed issues, anything they can find out there to take back to the grower.
Now, do you ever get calls from farmers, maybe requesting that somebody takes a look at a specific field? Maybe it's after a storm comes through, or maybe they're hearing neighbors talking about diseases or bugs that are coming in?
Yes, we do. And it's not just, our scouts that are getting asked to, as a crop specialist too, getting calls to go check their fields. And that's just another way to use those scouting pins that FieldView does offer to take a picture, and then that grower can actually see that area in the field.
Well, as we mentioned before, once you end up getting that scouting report, you can go out and you can start making, recommendations. I'm sure the crop specialist and the farmer are there trying to work that plan out. And I also know that, fertilizers is kind of a main topic, especially when we start into late season applications. Have you started seeing farmers kind of start working towards late season applications of nitrogen versus, anhydrous or whether it's fall or spring?
So yes, I have seen a few people who are pulling back their nitrogen that they do in the spring because they're just not able to get out there, and they just want to get out there and basically just get their crop in the ground. So there are some switches right now, but as of right now, it's hard to tell kind of what's going on, once those crops do get put in the ground.
Yeah, and that's where I think this year, going back into the scouting piece, I think being able to keep track of those fields and kind of keep track of the health of that health of those plants out there, I think is going to be very important. Do you use any of the satellite imagery within FieldView to whether pinpoint out any locations or keep track of anything?
So yes, we do use some of the imagery to go through kind of what's out there and just to get an idea where we need to go in that field. And, once we get into that field and we do see it, that's when we drop a pin. We take a picture of it. We're able to show the grower, or, if it's a scout, showing the crop specialist before they take to the grower and see what they can't do.
What have you seen, from utilizing satellite imagery? Have you seen an uptick in fungicide applications or back to the late season nitrogen based on maybe what you're seeing within an imagery?
Yes, I have seen a few actually last year with the fungicide where those images are actually showing up greener on the vegetation maps and more or less the scouting maps also. So that gives us a pretty good idea, if it is working, if it's out there. Obviously, we wait until harvest to get that data back to see, but I do see a little bit of difference on those field health images.
Now, when you start talking about, waiting to harvest to see the results, right? That seems like the game that we play within agriculture, right? We have to try a lot of things and ultimately check them in the fall. What do you see, for field region reports or things of that nature? Are guys jumping into the program and really starting to do some of their own analyzing?
Yes, that is actually one of the most used features of FieldView that guys use, or a lot of my customers use, is the yield analysis and being able to compare, the different fungicides, the different hybrids, circling those regions that, you might see a wetter area or a red area on that map, and circling them and seeing really how that did, how many acres was in that, and just breaking it down by the soil type even too.
Yeah, we've really started to hear a lot more about that of farmers really wanting to dig in and see if all of that investment worked. Well, Kayla, we've talked about technology, we've talked about scouting, we've talked about applications, really throughout the growing season, and I'm sitting here thinking of how much a retailer is truly involved in a farmer's operation.
Yeah, we are involved in so many different ways. It's crazy. We are helping them through climate, our scouting programs, and basically just ultimately being out there with the farmer, walking him through stuff, and being out there in the field and learning with the farmer.
Well, even outside of the growing season, what are some of the other areas that you're really helping a farmer, through the operation? So
yeah, an area outside of what we talked about, we are putting a lot of it into risk management tools, such as we offer ag finance, deferred payment options, contracting, all in an effort to doing business with us, as simple and as flexible for that grower, especially with a year like this is going.
Yeah, a lot of those features or a lot of those areas that you just touched on are going to be very important throughout this entire year.
Yes, very, very important, yes.
Well, Kayla, that really wraps up, what I was wanting to talk to you about. Again, I appreciate you, coming in here and having a conversation with me, especially during this busy time of the year.
Yeah, not a problem. I appreciate it.
Well, as always, thank you to our listeners for tuning in. And remember, Around the Farm is brought to you by Climate FieldView. Don't miss any episodes. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcast at. Or find episodes on climate.com. Also, I want to hear from you, so be sure to send in your thoughts or your questions by going to Twitter and using the FieldView Twitter handle @FieldView, and then use the hashtag FieldViewClint so I can find your tweets. I'd love to answer your questions in upcoming episodes, or even put together an episode that we're just answering questions. That may be an interesting one. And speaking of feedback, we'd love it if you'd take a minute, give us a 5-star rating, and give us a review. And as always, we'll see you around the farm.